Talking about what's been happening up there in the night sky on ABC Radio, Mid-North Coast Breakfast. We've got our local news coming up very, very shortly.
Afternoons with Josh Sepps is a classy show, and we're giving away a very classy prize. A free trip to Canberra, including flights, accommodation and a private VIP tour of the National Museum's new Ancient Greeks exhibition on loan from the British Museum. Every day this week, I'll share a secret clue. Answer it correctly, and you could be the winner in waiting of this once-in-a-lifetime experience. Only on Afternoons with Josh Sepps and only on ABC Radio. See? Classy.
Absolutely. On ABC, it's news time, 7:30.
Currently 19 degrees in Coffs Harbour and 17 in Port Macquarie. Good morning, Madeline Cross with ABC Mid-North and Coffs Coast News. An independent inquiry is being launched into New South Wales to investigate flood causes, recovery and response. Phoebe Bowden reports.
The state government is establishing an independent inquiry after devastating floods across the state over the last month. It will be led by recently retired Police Commissioner Michael Fuller and the chair of the Independent Planning Commission, Mary O'Kane. Over the next 3 months, it will investigate land use, planning and management, as well as flood causation. An interim report will be given to the Premier by the end of June, with the inquiry wrapping up by September this year.
An inquest into the death of Julie Fletcher, who died near Crowdy Bay during the Black Summer bushfires, will be opened this week. Jessica Clifford reports.
Miss Fletcher died when fire destroyed her home at Johns River on the night of November 8, 2019. Her inquest will be opened as part of the New South Wales Bushfires Coronial Inquiry, which has been focused on examining the cause and origin of fires on the North Coast and in the New England region for the past 3 weeks. Today, the inquiry will turn its attention to fires at Bill's Crossing, Hillville and the Rumba Complex during the next 4 days.
The Mid-North Coast has seen a spike in crime in recent months, going against a general downward trend across the state, according to the latest quarterly report from the New South Wales Bureau of Crime Statistics. The Mid-Coast LGA has seen a 167% rise in break and enters. In the Port Macquarie Hastings LGA, there was a rise of more than 50% in car thefts. Jackie Fitzgerald, the Bureau's executive director, says the natural disasters faced in the region over the last 2 years could be a contributing factor.
Those natural disasters, there is some evidence that can increase crime over the longer term, and certainly if there's economic upheaval and people are without employment and stable housing and things like that, that can all play into an increase in offending.
The Greens have announced Coffs Harbour environmental scientist and planning specialist Tim Knott as the party's candidate in the seat of Cowper for the coming federal election. Now working in carpentry, Mr Knott wants to see a ban on residential development in flood zones and work done sustainably to address the electorate's housing crisis. Mr Knott says part of his motivation for running was his lack of faith in current member Pat Conahan and the National Party's record on climate action.
I personally have sent letters to Pat asking him about action for climate change, asking him about progressive jobs, and the reply I got back I didn't consider very satisfactory.
The state government has announced more shark mitigation measures following the fatal shark attacks in Sydney last month and Emerald Beach and Tuncurry in the past year. New South Wales Agriculture Minister Dugald Saunders says incidents were a reminder of the threat posed by sharks and more control measures were necessary. Mr Saunders says $85 million will be spent in ongoing funding over the next 4 years along the coast.
We realise now, I guess, as a society that it's not about trying to get rid of sharks, it's about trying to mitigate our interactions with them. With the smart drum lines, if the shark is caught off the coast, there's a beacon that goes off and alerts one of the contractors to go and release that shark and tag it. We can then track that shark.
Waterfall Way has reopened to single-lane traffic west of Thora over the weekend after a landslip blocked access for weeks. The roadway was closed following severe weather in the state's north earlier this month. Transport for New South Wales and Council says it will continue to monitor the road, which may need to be closed at short notice in the event of further slips. Member for Oxley Melinda Pavey says crews have also completed work at Myers Bluff, and that section of road has reopened from 1 to 2 lanes. In news elsewhere, the Paramedics Union will return to the negotiating table today ahead of planned industrial action. The Health Services Union says paramedics are being overworked during COVID with not enough staff to cover all stations. New South Wales Ambulance says investment in the service is at record levels and 750 additional staff have been recruited in the past 4 years. And authorities in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol say 3 Russian missiles have hit an art school where they say 400 people were sheltering. To the weather, partly cloudy across the region today. This is ABC News.
This is Cameron Marshall on ABC Mid-North Coast.
Morning to you on this Monday, the 21st day of March. The sun is shining. Much for your time, and we look forward to talking more about what's coming up for music and food lovers. But in the meantime, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you, Cameron.
That is coordinator of the Beats Festival for the Mid-Coast, Donna Ballard. Time for local news. It's 7:30.
Currently 16 in Port Macquarie and 15 degrees in Coffs Harbour. Good morning, Madeline Cross with ABC Mid-North and Coffs Coast News. The federal government is being urged to overhaul the social security and private rental sectors to help tackle the national housing and rental crisis. The University of New South Wales and Australian Council of Social Services have released a report showing regional rents have soared by 18% during the pandemic, partly driven by people's desires for homes rather than apartments. It's also blaming government's cash grants to build residential properties. Professor Hal Paulson from the UNSW says the withdrawal of extra income support has also played a major role.
That kind of shone a light on a possible future that we decided, no, we don't want that. We're going to go back to what it was before. Just reverting to that after the pandemic, that's an overdue reform, which I think a lot of economists would agree is something which Australia should be contemplating anyway.
A government report has found the Mid-North Coast economy is being hampered by poor mobile reception and internet connections. Nick Parmenter reports.
The report by Infrastructure Australia notes that the Mid-North Coast has more than 200 mobile black spots, scoring 63.2 on the Australian Digital Inclusion Index. That's nearly 8 points below the national average. Practically speaking, the figures mean the region has found it much more difficult to attract new business and investment opportunities. The report says improving the resilience of the region's telecommunications network can also help it be better prepared to respond to disasters like the bushfires experienced in the summer of 2019.
The New South Wales government's being urged to give principals more of a say over how maintenance funding is spent at schools. Melinda Hayter reports.
The state's Upper House Education Committee is holding an inquiry into the planning and delivery of school infrastructure. More than 100 submissions were lodged as part of the probe, including from the New South Wales Isolated Children's Parents Association, which says some principals don't have any involvement in determining maintenance priorities, and it's often thought the money could be better spent. In its submission, the Education Department says considerable work has been done in recent years to strengthen the rigour of infrastructure planning and delivery.
Mid-North Coast communities affected by the 2019 bushfires have successfully campaigned for federal government funds to improve or construct new community evacuation centres. Centres at Tononi and Burrell Creek are receiving upgrades, while Rainbow Flat will see a new community hall built. Rainbow Flat resident Mark Johnson led the push for a government grant, with the nearest evacuation centre 26 kilometres away. He says the night of November 8, 2019 was harrowing.
The highway was closed north and south. The Lakes Way was closed into Foster. We took refuge at the Access Fuels petrol station at Rainbow Flat from 4 o'clock until I think I left there about 10:15.
A Mid-North Coast pharmacy says demand for COVID-19 booster shots is slowly increasing again due to the new Omicron variant BA2. New South Wales officials are concerned about the lagging uptake of booster doses, with 62.3% of the eligible population having received a third shot. That rate is sitting only above Queensland, where 61% of people have had a booster. Amelia Harris from Great Lakes Pharmacy says the rise in demand comes just weeks after a decline in the service.
It was getting back to some sort of normality for pharmacy where boosters and rat tests have sort of taken over our everyday transactions, and that was declining. But now, since there's been a little bit more media on increased cases, we're sort of starting to get a little bit more demand again for boosters.
In news elsewhere, the first project to map childcare availability in every neighbourhood has revealed more than 1/3 of Australians live in areas with a serious childcare shortage. It includes more than 1 million Australians in areas with no access to childcare at all. And hundreds of emergency workers and soldiers have been deployed to the scene of a plane crash in southern China that's presumed to have killed 132 people. The plane crashed on a mountain, causing a forest fire. No survivors are expected to be found. To the weather, a sunny day for the mid-north coast with the chance of some fog this morning. A top today of 26 in Coffs Harbour, 28 in Kempsey, 26 degrees for Port Macquarie and 27 in Taree and Foster. ABC News.
This is Cameron Marshall on ABC Mid-North Coast.
And good morning to you. On this Tuesday, the 22nd of March, Kevin is with me at Marine Rescue at Foster, flying high in the Concorde on ABC Mid-North Coast. News time, 7:30.
Currently 16 degrees in Port Macquarie and 20 in Coffs Harbour. Good morning, Madeline Cross with ABC Mid-North and Coffs Coast News. An inquiry has heard John River's bushfire victim, Julie Fletcher, was on the phone with her sister as the fire impacted her home. Jessica Clifford reports.
The New South Wales Bushfires Coronial Inquiry has heard Julie Fletcher had planned to leave her Johns River home on the mid-north coast early if the fire approached on the day of November 8, 2019. She left work at lunchtime to go home and pack her things. At 11 p.m, her sister, Daintree Durand, rang her to tell her to leave, but the fire had already hit her home. Miss Fletcher told her sister her house was exploding all around her, then the line went dead. Her remains were discovered by police the next day. In a family statement, Miss Fletcher was remembered as compassionate, caring and a capable woman who was loved by many.
A program that trains medical specialists in regional areas will be extended for 4 years after the federal government announced an additional $700 million funding. It will let specialists be trained outside major hospital settings, such as in private practice or Aboriginal health services. Federal Regional Health Minister David Gillespie says letting doctors train in regional areas could mean they are more likely to stay.
From anaesthesia, psychiatry, through to obstetrics and gynecology surgeries, general specialists, you name it. It's really important that we have a better distribution of medical specialists in regional Australia. That's why we're focusing on getting it more into regional areas.
A childcare provider on the mid-north coast says a new report into childcare availability highlights the severe shortage of services in regional areas. Victoria University has mapped childcare availability across the country for the first time and found 1 in 3 Australians live in a childcare desert. According to the report, nearly all of the mid-north coast is classified as a childcare desert. Mid-Coast Family Daycare Manager Bonnie Roundtree says investing in quality care is key to attracting more workers into the industry.
having service operators and approved providers that have knowledge of the industry and don't just see it as a money maker is also really important. You don't operate a service efficiently, you're not going to keep good staff. You're not going to have those great educators there providing care to those children.
The Coffs Harbour City Council will try to tackle the ongoing housing affordability crisis at its meeting tomorrow. Indiana Hansen reports.
Councillors will consider an affordable housing policy at its fortnightly meeting. It comes after many council resolutions in 2021 to address the significant issues relating to social and affordable housing, which the council says impact many residents in the Coffs Harbour local government area. A homelessness policy will also be considered to help improve the outcomes for people sleeping rough in the community. The policy would involve the council working closely with the homelessness sector to develop an action plan.
Secret audio recordings from the state's top crime-fighting body will be played when William Tyrrell's foster father faces a 2-day hearing later this year. Mark Reddy reports.
William Tyrrell's foster father is expected to front the Downing Centre in Sydney in October for a 2-day hearing. The 55-year-old is charged with knowingly giving false or misleading evidence to the New South Wales Crime Commission. He's pleaded not guilty. The court heard electronic material, including secret recordings with police and the Commission, will be played before a magistrate. William vanished from Kendall in 2014. Both foster parents are also charged with the alleged common assault of a child who is not William Tyrrell.
In news elsewhere, the federal government will use the coming federal budget to try and lift small business cash flows and improve company tax systems. The government will reduce the level of pay-as-you-go company tax instalments for the next financial year to try and keep more cash in the hands of small businesses and sole traders. And there have been rises in COVID case numbers in 3 states over the past week. New South Wales reported around 21,000 new cases yesterday, 5,000 more than the previous day. New cases in Queensland jumped 15% and case numbers in Victoria also rose. To the weather, mostly sunny across the mid-north coast with the chance of some morning fog in the north. There's a high chance of showers later today, as well as the chance of a severe thunderstorm with heavy rain, which may lead to flash flooding. A top today of 30 degrees in Coffs Harbour, 32 in Kempsey, and 30 degrees in Port Macquarie, Taree and Foster. ABC News.
This is Cameron Marshall on ABC Mid-North Coast.
Kinagay, good morning. Broadcasting across Warramai, Biripi and Dungutty country. It's lovely to have your company today. Wednesday, March the 23rd.
The people along the river would go, oh, the postman's coming, and they'd run out and get their letters or whatever and go down to their little jetty. Yeah. So very exciting having that one.
Ron Window from Port Macquarie's historic slipway at Hibbard. On ABC Mid-North Coast, news time, 7:30.
Currently 20 degrees in Port Macquarie and Coffs Harbour. Good morning, Madeline Cross with ABC Mid-North and Coffs Coast News. Mid-North Coast residents are being urged to keep across the evolving weather situation with widespread rainfall expected for the next few days. The Weather Bureau says severe thunderstorms have eased over the area. However, there is a chance for further severe storms later today. Meteorologist Rosemary Barr says forecast rainfall may cause minor flooding along the Bellinger and Nambucca rivers.
If you happen to be in the vicinity of a river system in any kind of low-lying region, it's going to be really important to continue to monitor those flood watches and warnings really closely, as well as the potential for any flash flooding that's associated with more short, sharp bursts of rainfall that tends to be associated with thunderstorm activity.
Local mayors and councillors from flood-damaged areas across the country, including the Mid-North and Coffs Coast, are calling on the federal government for more support. Indiana Hansen reports.
Following recent flood events, 31 mayors and councillors have released a joint statement calling on urgent action from the federal government to do more to protect communities from tragic and costly extreme weather events. The Mayor of the Mid-Coast Council, Claire Pontin, and Bellingen Councillor Dominic King are among those to have signed the statement. It calls on the government to deliver an ambitious emissions target this decade. The statement also calls for more funding sources for councils, which are responding to climate impacts and cutting greenhouse gas emissions.
An inquiry into the Hillville fire near Foster, which is believed to have been started by burning debris on November 2019, will begin this morning. Jessica Clifford reports.
The New South Wales Bushfires Coronial Inquiry will wrap up its North Coast hearings today with the final fire inquiry to examine the cause and origins of the Hillville fire near Foster. It burned more than 30,000 hectares during November and December of 2019 and destroyed multiple properties. During its North Coast hearings, the inquests of 8 people who died during the fires have been opened, with all of those now adjourned for further hearings in September. The inquiry has also established the majority of fires that burned through the region were started by lightning in remote bushland.
A survey has found the rate of sexual assault of students at Charles Sturt University is well above the national average. Molly Gorman reports.
More than 850 Charles Sturt students were among thousands to respond to the National Student Safety Survey. Results published yesterday revealed almost 7.5% reported being sexually assaulted since starting at CSU, compared to 4.5% nationally. 16% reported experiencing sexual harassment. In a statement, the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Renee Leon, thanked students for responding and said any instance of assault or harassment was one too many. She said a series of workshops were underway to teach about consent, reporting misconduct and safety on campus.
The Greater Port Macquarie Tourism Association is welcoming the purchase of the Mercure Centro Hotel by the Laundy Hotel Group. The 77-year-old family business owns more than 20 venues in New South Wales and plans to continue running the hotel with local hospitality operator Alastair Flower. Association President Janet Hyde says it's a positive development for the local tourism sector, which is in the process of bouncing back from a COVID downturn.
It's just great that we've got new blood coming into port. The previous people who ran the Mercure were very dedicated and did a wonderful job. It has so much potential. It's a terrific property, and anyone who invests in tourism has got my tick.
Around 400 people were evacuated from a Port Macquarie shopping centre after a hazmat emergency yesterday afternoon. Fire and Rescue New South Wales say a refrigeration gas leak at a supermarket on Park Street forced the evacuation. Crews worked to disperse the gas and the area was declared all clear just after 2 p.m. In other news, the Greens want to abolish all student debt, saying they would lobby a Labor government to do so if they land in the balance of power at the next election. And NATO's Secretary-General has confirmed the organisation will approve a major increase in forces deployed to Eastern Europe, with 4 new NATO battle groups to be sent to Slovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria and Romania. To the weather, cloudy with a very high chance of showers across the mid-north coast region, a chance of a thunderstorm possibly severe with heavy falls. A top today of 25 degrees in Coffs Harbour, 24 in Kempsey and Port Macquarie and 23 degrees in Taree and Foster. ABC News.
This is Cameron Marshall on ABC Mid-North Coast.
Yes, I think Alan at Haddam Vale has picked up the highest rainfall reading so far, 80 millimetres, and we've had quite a few around the 60 to 70 millimetre mark in the upper Hastings, in particular Mount Seaview.
Hello and friends, we're heading up to the news at 7:30. More to bring you right after that.
Good morning, Lani Ottaway with ABC New England Northwest Local News. The Paramedics Union and New South Wales Ambulance will return to the negotiating table today ahead of planned industrial action. Jake Lapham has more.
A meeting in the Industrial Relations Commission between union representatives and New South Wales Ambulance has been set for this morning. It comes as the two parties remain at loggerheads over staffing and conditions. The union says paramedics are being overworked during COVID, with not enough staff to cover all stations. But New South Wales Ambulance insists investment in the service is at record levels, and 750 additional staff have been recruited in the past 4 years. The union says emergency calls today will still be answered.
The New South Wales government is establishing an independent inquiry to investigate flood preparedness, recovery and response. Recently retired Police Commissioner Mick Fuller and Independent Planning Commission Chair Mary O'Kane will lead the inquiry. Over the next 3 months, it'll examine land use planning, management and flood causation. A Tamworth restaurant owner says any budget measures that'll help entice customers back post-COVID are welcome, but that alcohol subsidies may not be the most effective way to do it. There's been media speculation the Prime Minister was considering cutting taxes for beer in half, although it hasn't been publicly confirmed or denied. Managing Director of the Central Hospitality Group, Jai Segbor, says costs such as freight and staffing are greater barriers to getting people in the door.
If the alcohol tax is reduced, does it mean I have 4 beers or I have 3 beers? I think people are busting at the seams for life to return to some form of normality. And so I think people's habits will probably continue, but it might change the number of consumption that they take based on the price.
The member for Tamworth says he wants to present the State Planning Authority with a true reflection of what Nundle residents think of a proposed wind farm in the region. The state government has asked the company behind the project for more information before it makes its assessment. Kevin Anderson is sending mail-out surveys to communities near the Hills of Gold wind farm site this week. Proponent Engie maintains it's worked hard to secure local support for the development, but Mr Anderson says he'll do his own research.
What I want to do is to be very clear that the research I do is unbiased and that there is every opportunity for everyone to have their say in terms of how they feel about this particular project.
A group of Gomeroi people will decide this week whether to accept a deal from Santos about the Narrabri gas project. Hayley Craig reports.
Santos wants to mine land that's covered by the Gomeroi native title claim, which means the claim group gets offered a deal by the company. The group is holding a nation meeting for 5 days, which will address the proposed agreement. But if it rejects it, that doesn't mean the mine won't go ahead. It'll also discuss what to do about applications that Santos filed to the Native Title Tribunal in May last year, which deal with the company wanting to use the land in a way that affects native title rights and interests.
Rural landholders in the Gunnedah region will now be able to host farm stay accommodation and tours with greater ease. The process to allow visitors onto farming land has been streamlined after a classification of the rules was changed in a meeting between the local council and the State Planning Department. Mayor Jamie Chaffey says while there isn't wide local interest yet, the change is needed for future tourism developments.
By making the planning process so much easier, I'm sure that's going to encourage more people to take a look at this opportunity. It's about sharing that experience that we all know and love because we live here in the bush, can share with other people who just don't have that experience and knowledge about where their food and their fibre comes from.
The federal government is investing $60 million to improve recycling of soft plastics. The lightweight, flexible plastics like bread bags and biscuit packets are harder to recycle than hard plastics like shampoo bottles. Environment Minister Susan Lee says the funding in next week's federal budget aims to help companies scale up their soft plastic recycling and develop new technology.
So if we can solve this problem and turn soft plastics back into soft plastics, then we know we're not actually adding from the virgin stock of fuel and we're making use of recycling technology.
To the weather, a sunny day across the region with patches of early fog in the Tablelands north. Top temperatures in Inverell of 29 degrees, Glen Innes 24, Armidale 23, Tamworth a top of 29, Narrabri 32 and Moree heading for 34 degrees. ABC News.
This is Christy Reading on ABC New England Northwest.
And a very good morning. Monday, it's the 21st of March. Great to have you with us. The start of another week. Some rain on the forecast for our region from around Thursday as well. We'll be talking more about the weather.
Sheep away from our responsibility, but just an advice for traders in the area that it's probably a good idea to have a secondary form of protection.
I think there'll be a lot of people looking at that and maybe a more permanent option as well, Mike, from what we're hearing today. Thank you for joining us on this today. We appreciate your time.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Thank you. That is Mike Maram there, Telstra's manager for our region. Tara, what are your thoughts on that?
Probably a couple of things. Definitely be clear in your advice, Mike. I appreciate what Telstra's trying to do. We all understand about upgrades, but we were never told an outage was zero service. There was a person on the NBN in the main street. It didn't work either. And I think last night at 9 o'clock, there was no service. 3G is just a spinning circle. It does not work. Couldn't make phone calls. So I'm hoping that he's right, and it's right this morning. The most frustrating part was not being able to call anybody and get anyone to answer the phone when we tried to deal with Telstra on this. So if anyone at Telstra is able to leave you with a contact number, I think everyone in Uralla would be glad, particularly if this morning there's still no service.
Tara, thank you for joining us to talk about this today. All our fingers are crossed that it could be smooth sailing for your Seasons of New England event this weekend.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And perhaps for Mike's clarification, it's on the 26th of March, Saturday.
Okay, Tara, thank you very much. Thank you. Tara Toomey there, local business owner in Uralla. How are things looking if you're in Uralla this morning? 0467 922 684. What service do you have? Or you can give us a call, if you can, of course, 1300 648 222. It's news time.
Good morning, Patrick Bell with ABC New England Northwest Local News. A childcare researcher says urgent reform of the sector is essential if parents are to see changes in availability. A new study by Victoria University has found more than 5 children are waiting for every vacant position in towns such as Inverell and Tenterfield, and more than 4 children per vacancy in Armidale. Dr Peter Hurley says the report found childcare centres may need to move towards government regulation instead of privatisation.
We don't need to do it like that. I mean, why is it that we've got this situation where families are having to desperately search for childcare, 2 years before they might need it? I mean, if you look at something like schools, they're centrally managed, they're centrally planned. That does not happen in childcare. It's not something that's even thought about by governments.
Government economic stimulus during the pandemic is being partly blamed for fueling the country's soaring property and rental prices. A report by the University of New South Wales and Australian Council of Social Services reveals by September 2021, rents in regional New South Wales had risen by 17% but slipped 2% in Sydney. Professor Hal Pawson from the NSW says while the income support and building grants helped individuals and businesses, it's had a negative impact on housing.
The effort to directly stimulate the private housing market by making cash grants available on a bigger scale than usual, that I think really with hindsight is something that they should be anyway, regretting now, because that only compounded the spike in house prices just over a year.
The New South Wales government's being urged to give principals more of a say over how maintenance funding is spent at schools. Melinda Hayter reports.
The state's Upper House Education Committee is holding an inquiry into the planning and delivery of school infrastructure. More than 100 submissions were lodged as part of the probe, including from the New South Wales Isolated Children's Parents Association, which says some principals don't have any involvement in determining maintenance priorities, and it's often thought the money could be better spent. In its submission, the Education Department says considerable work has been done in recent years to strengthen the rigour of infrastructure planning and delivery.
The Tamworth Regional Council says a new food scraps program will help figure out how best to design an organics recycling facility. 250 households have been asked to join a 12-week trial to put food scraps into a green garden waste bin, which will be taken to a compost site. The council's Mornay Catting says contamination with other rubbish is the biggest hurdle for the program to work effectively. He says the trial will help solve any issues before they take the facility to tender closer to June.
One of the issues we need to address is to try and understand upfront decontamination infrastructure. That needs to be designed into the detailed design. This trial will certainly help us do that.
A shipment of thermal coal mined in the northwest region is headed to Ukraine. Kemi Maguire reports.
At least 70,000 tonnes has been donated to the Ukrainian government after a request for supplies to keep coal-fired power generators in the country operating. The federal government has bought the coal from resource company Whitehaven and will cover the expense of shipping it to neighbouring Poland. The majority of Whitehaven's mines are in the Gunnedah region and Werris Creek. The Prime Minister Scott Morrison said earlier this week much of Australia's coal exports have already been claimed, and Whitehaven was able to commit to the amount needed, whilst ensuring contracted customer demand was met.
A lack of agri-tech and carbon farming in the New England northwest may soon be changed. A $9 million federal government grant will fund experts across the country, including in Narrabri and Armidale. It comes after a more than $60 million investment into drought resilience and technology. Federal Agriculture Minister David Littleproud says the experts will act as conduits between crop and livestock producers and government bodies.
We're getting feedback back from farmers about what will shift the dial to improve their productivity and their profitability. And then they'll feedback so that I have an understanding of what the 15 research and development corporations that get that $1.1 billion levies every year should be doing.
Sunny across the region today, top temperatures of 25 degrees in Armidale and Glen Innes, 31 in Tamworth and 34 for Narrabri and Moree.
You're listening to Christy Reading on ABC New England Northwest.
Good morning and great to have you with us. Welcome. It is Tuesday, the 22nd of March. I do hope you're travelling along well today. About FOMO, the fear of missing out, something that lots of children and teenagers in particular are facing at the moment, missing out on things like school excursion, big social activities because of COVID. So stay with us for that. It is news time.
Good morning, Patrick Bell with ABC New England Northwest local news. There's growing pressure on the state government to release the business case for the proposed new Dungowan Dam. The Tamworth Regional Council has unanimously called for the document to be made public. The government claims the business case itself must remain confidential, but excerpts will be included in the environmental impact statement. Deputy Mayor Mark Rodder told last night's meeting some residents are sceptical about whether the dam will secure the region's water supply.
As for transparency, many of us squeaked the term during our respective campaigns. Here's our opportunity to request the New South Wales government to deliver some transparency and tell us the true cost to the residents of TRC and the taxpayers.
An airline which plans to fly from Tamworth to both Melbourne and the Sunshine Coast insists the business model is viable. Bonza is expected to commence flying as the country's second low-cost carrier later this year. The CEO, Tim Jordan, says Australia is unique among developed economies for having just one budget airline option. He says he's confident the company will attract new travellers.
We are about the leisure market and stimulating a brand new market so that people do go to aspirational destinations where maybe they'd like to have travelled or like to travel more to, but haven't been able to because of time and because of cost.
The state government says there's still $50 million on the table to improve a major transport route between the New England region and the coast. Freight to Armidale has been interrupted for almost a month after a landslide blocked the waterfall way between Dorrigo Mountain and Thora. The road is now open to single-lane traffic. Member for Oxley, Melinda Pavey, says the slopes must be made more secure for future severe weather events.
To this point in time where we have put those big steel nails into the side of the mountain, those areas haven't failed again. But, it'd be a false sense of security to say it won't happen again, but we are spending money and doing what we can to ensure its integrity.
Disease has been front of mind for many cotton growers across the region as they approach the final weeks of the season. Heavy rainfall and a cooler summer has meant irrigated cotton is late reaching maturity. It's expected to be harvested close to the Easter weekend. Robert Everly from the Lower Namoy Cotton Growers Association says despite the setback, return value for cotton will still be above average.
For a lot of people in the Lower Namoy, it is a home of verticillium wilt. That's sort of noticeably worse this year than it's been for a few years. The only good thing is certainly the early crops probably largely been spared major yield losses.
Meanwhile, 2 industry bodies will use $1.5 million in federal funding to diversify the country's cotton markets. Agriculture Minister David Littleproud says Australia was once exporting 71% of its cotton to China, but that number has fallen to just 5%.
So what we've said is we need to diversify quickly, and we're investing in the industry themselves to do that, to find the new markets. And we are finding those new markets, whether they be Bangladesh, Vietnam, India or Pakistan.
An historian from the University of Newcastle says she was shocked to find out how many massacres were carried out in the New England Northwest during the Frontier Wars. A team of experts has finished its final update of a Frontier Massacre map, which brings the number of sites in the region to 20. The research says only Aboriginal people were killed in the region's massacres. Emeritus Professor Lyndall Ryan says she previously knew of only 2 sites in the Northwest.
To realise that it was quite a sustained war where massacres were being carried out came as a great shock to someone like me who's been teaching Australian history for at least 40 years.
And the curtain is being lifted today on an almost $40,000 artwork which showcases Glen Innes's Indigenous farming and cultural history. Steel-cut silhouettes depict Indigenous leaders and symbols, a farmer and his tractor, modern wind turbines and the town's iconic standing stones. Mayor Rob Bannum says the council wants to see more creativity in the town's main streets.
Of the 2 submissions, there was one by Simon Franklin, which was going to be a Scotty dog, so the resilient, willful yet loving and loyal to its master. Jen Lloyd Hornsby and Sarah Fletcher's laser cut panel. Some people say, we could fill potholes with that money, but an arts grant has to be spent on art, and that's what we've done.
The chance of fog on parts of the tablelands this morning, a shower or 2 and a thunderstorm possible across the region. Storms on and east of the ranges could bring heavy rain and gusty winds. Top temperatures of 27 degrees in Armidale and 33 in Tamworth.
You're listening to Christy Reading on ABC New England Northwest.
Hello there, and great to have you with us. Welcome. It is Wednesday, the 23rd of March. I do hope you're travelling along well.
TV or log in to stream on ABC iView. This is Christy Reading on ABC New England Northwest.
We are heading up to the news at 7:30. After that, member for Northern Tablelands Adam Marshall has accused the local health service of cannibalising services and staff from smaller facilities to support larger centres. We'll hear more next.
Good morning, Patrick Bell with ABC New England Northwest Local News. Rural health advocates say they're closely monitoring the number of COVID infections in New South Wales as the Omicron subvariant spreads. More than 24,000 cases were recorded yesterday, up by more than 9,000 since Monday. Hospitalisations remain steady, with 44 people in intensive care. Rural Doctors Association CEO Peter Rutherford says any surge in cases will impact already stretched services in country areas.
It's really important that as we continue to open up and as new strains emerge, that the government does continue to take precautions to ensure that the system doesn't crack under any strain.
Local Land Services says feral pig populations are rising after wet weather has created perfect breeding conditions for the animals. The group says it's getting more calls for help from landholders on the western side of the Northern Tablelands to control the pigs. It's also seeing populations increase in areas it hasn't before, near Armidale and east of Glen Innes. David Clark from the Northern Tablelands LLS says it's improving surveillance efforts to understand the problem.
Since the conditions have become a lot more wetter, it's creating a lot more food, a lot more water, ideal breeding conditions for the pigs who are naturally wired to try and increase their populations back up, which is obviously going to lead to population numbers coming back a lot faster.
Pumps and bores in the region are being investigated by the independent water regulator to check if mandated meter readers are being used. The Narrabri region is considered one of the state's most prominent for the use of underground water and is the first to be targeted over the next 6 weeks. The Natural Resources Access Regulator's Gregory Abood says landholders will receive hefty fines if they've not complied with the new rules in time.
For individuals, it's $750 and for corporations, $1,500.
On the 1st of December 2021, pumps and bores were required to have an accurate meter. That can be town water supplies and it can be irrigated agriculture.
An aviation expert has questioned the decision by Rex to increase fares for its regional flights. Rex has announced it will increase fares across its domestic and regional networks by $10 and says it's in response to rising fuel prices. The chairman of Strategic Aviation Solutions, Neil Hansford, says the recent rise in oil prices doesn't justify the increase in fares.
The fact that Virgin or Qantas haven't put on fuel surcharges or increases suggests to me that it's not immediately necessary, and Rex have increased the charges for other than fuel.
Police are searching for 2 cows and their calves missing from a rural property in the region. The cattle were last seen almost 4 months ago on a property at on Oakvale Road at Upper Horton. They're 3.5-year-old red and black drought master cows with calves about 4 to 6 months old. Rural crime investigators in Tamworth and Gunnedah are examining the incident. Lifeline's second-hand stores across the region will see extra support after the organisation created a new management role this week. Lifeline has appointed the former Regional Australia Bank CEO, Kevin Dupay, from Armidale as its New England region chair, overseeing stores and telephone operators. Mr Dupay says although the region is already highly condensed with second-hand outlets, more stores are needed as livability costs skyrocket.
It's healthy competition with the others. We're all trying to fund our services. We've now just gone into Armidale and Tamworth and access to counselling or phone. It's great to be back in the New England, and we do have more plans, so you'll see us continue to expand.
A landmark social event on the Moree calendar is set to go ahead stronger than ever this year after a makeover of a key venue. The Moree Race Club has won a state government grant of more than $1 million to restore its grandstand and for other works. The Secretary, Michelle Gobert, says the work should be complete in time for its namesake Cup in September.
Looking to improve our balustrading, plumbing and some concrete cancer in the country. It's just that, central gathering point for those rural communities, and that's essentially a great day out at the races. It's not always about the horses.
Showers across the region today and thunderstorms are also possible. Top temperatures of 21 degrees in Armidale, 28 in Tamworth, 33 in Narrabri and 35 degrees in Moree.
You're listening to Christy Reading on ABC New England Northwest.
Hello and great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. It is Thursday, the 24th of March.
It's pretty upbeat.
I wake up happy. It sounds happy.
They say it should have a melody you could easily sing or hum along to, and then it gets a bit technical. Dominant frequencies around 500 hertz, not too fast or too slow, 100 to 120 beats per minute. But there's a great article on The Conversation where you can listen back and find out more about the research.
You're awake now and happy for the rest of the day. A win for the men's Knights and the Jets A-League over the weekend. More on that when we talk with Helen O'Neill.
Hi, I'm Richard Feidler. Tune in to Conversations, weekday mornings from 11 here on ABC Radio, or choose from thousands of shockingly thought-provoking conversations anytime on the ABC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with ABC News. An independent inquiry is being launched in New South Wales to investigate flood causes, recovery and response. Phoebe Bowden reports.
The state government is establishing an independent inquiry after devastating floods across the state over the last month. It will be led by recently retired Police Commissioner Michael Fuller and the chair of the Independent Planning Commission, Mary O'Kane. Over the next 3 months, it will investigate land use, planning and management, as well as flood causation. An interim report will be given to the Premier by the end of June, with the inquiry wrapping up by September this year.
The search continues for a gunman who shot a man in Sydney's west yesterday. Danuta Kazaki has more.
Police are continuing the search for a gunman who shot the 39-year-old man in Hebersham yesterday afternoon. Emergency services were called to Bletchley Place after 2:30, following reports a man was shot outside a home. Witness Damien Taylor says his daughter's second birthday party was underway when gunfire started next door.
And we heard a loud pop noise.
The 39-year-old man was treated by New South Wales ambulance paramedics for 2 gunshot wounds to his leg and shoulder. He remains in Westmead Hospital. Police say initial inquiries show the incident was targeted.
There are reports of another strike on a building in the Ukrainian city of Mariupol where civilians were taking shelter. Barbara Miller has more.
Authorities in the besieged southern city say Russian missiles have struck an art school where several hundred residents were sheltering. There's been no confirmation of the strike or word on number of potential casualties, but those managing to flee the city have spoken of dire conditions and of many civilian deaths. The United Nations says more than 900 civilians have been killed since the war began 3.5 weeks ago. The UN says 10 million Ukrainians have been displaced. 3.5 million have left the country. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Lviv.
Residents of Wickham and Islington say they're stunned at a decision by Newcastle Council to mow a section of Islington Park affected by asbestos. Chunks of asbestos fell on Islington Park when the nearby Wickham wool stores were destroyed in a fire nearly 3 weeks ago. The park was reopened last week, but residents say they're finding pieces of asbestos in the grass. Will Sherman learned via a letterbox drop that council will do a test mow tomorrow, which he says is a bad idea.
Anything that goes up in those blades is going to get shoved out the back, smashed to pieces and thrown in the air. So, you're almost sort of pouring fuel on the fire.
Newcastle Council says the purpose of the trial is to see whether the park can be mowed safely and that it will have air monitors in place. A Lake Macquarie charity wants to pair householders with young people and older women who are homeless in a bid to address the housing crisis. South Lakes Incorporated plans to trial Share Your Home in the Central Coast and Hunter regions. Founder and CEO Christine Mastello says arrangements would last up for 3 months.
We're just going to allow the homeless teenagers and the homeless women from domestic violence or whatever their situation to just stay on the streets while our government gets around to building this social housing. No, we have to do something now. We've waited so long.
To sport now, and in rugby league, Newcastle Knights coach Adam O'Brien says he was impressed with his team's win over the West Tigers, given how many players weren't able to take the field. The Knights beat the Tigers 26-4 yesterday at Hunter Stadium in front of more than 23,000 fans. They were without key players like Kalen Ponga, David Clemmer and Daniel Safidi. After the game, O'Brien said the whole team stepped up.
The elephant in the room is the amount of guys that were missing. And we had like 7 players this week that didn't participate in one training run, not even captain's run. They just turned up to play today. So we've worked really hard on our culture, and I know that's as good as next man up mentality that I've seen from the boys.
And briefly in the A-League men's competition, Adelaide United and the Western Sydney Wanderers had a 0-0 draw. Checking the Hunters weather now, partly cloudy today, light winds becoming south to southeasterly, daytime maximum temperatures in the low to high 20s. Newcastle, Maitland and Scone are all heading for a top of 26 degrees, Singleton expecting a top of 27. Tomorrow is expected to be sunny with light winds. You're listening to ABC News.
Breakfast with Dan and Jenny on ABC Newcastle.
ABC Newcastle.
Hope you had a good weekend. Maybe you went along to the reopening of Lambton Library, enjoyed that technology to scan yourself in and check out a book.
Almost sweet music. After the news, which is coming up for you, some concerns about the NRLW expanding. Is it too much, too soon? We'll get into that soon. You're on ABC Newcastle Breakfast with Dan and Jenny. It's 6:30.
Hi, I'm Richard Feidler. Tune in to Conversations, weekday mornings from 11 here on ABC Radio, or choose from thousands of shockingly thought-provoking conversations anytime on the ABC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Madeline Lewis with ABC News. Hundreds of emergency workers and soldiers have deployed to the scene of a plane crash in southern China that's presumed to have killed 132 people. East Asia correspondent Bill Birtles reports.
The Boeing 737-800 was shown on flight tracking screens suddenly plunging from 30,000 feet. The plane, flying from southwestern Kunming to Guangzhou, crashed on a mountain, causing a forest fire. No survivors are expected to be found, and China's leader Xi Jinping has ordered a full investigation. The aircraft is not the Boeing 737 MAX, which was involved in 2 fatal crashes in recent years. The crash is the first passenger jet accident in China for more than a decade. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Taipei.
Russia's military has struck the port city of Odessa in Ukraine's south, which has largely avoided any major bombardments up until this point of Moscow's invasion. Ann Barker has more.
Odessa's city council says Russian forces struck residential buildings on its outskirts, the first attack so far on the Black Sea port city. It says no one was killed in the strike, and emergency services later extinguished a fire. Odessa has so far avoided the fighting that has damaged or destroyed other key cities in Ukraine's south and east, though Russia has ships operating off the Black Sea coast. The city's mayor, Gennady Trukhanov, has vowed residents will fight for their city and not leave Odessa.
The New South Wales Health Minister Brad Hazzard says efforts are being made to resolve issues raised by the Nurses Union, which has threatened another strike next week. Nurses are voting on whether to strike next Thursday. The Nurses Union says little progress has been made since the last strike in February. The federal government is being urged to overhaul the social security and private rental sectors to help tackle a national housing and rental crisis. The University of New South Wales and Australian Council of Social Services have released a report showing rents in regional areas increased by 18% during the pandemic. It was partly driven by a desire for houses rather than units. Professor Hal Pawson from the university says the withdrawal of extra income support has also played a role.
That kind of shone a light on a possible future that we decided, no, we don't want that. We're going to go back to what it was before. Just reverting to that after the pandemic, that's an overdue reform, which I think a lot of economists would agree is something which Australia should be contemplating anyway.
It'll be learning from home again today for students at Irrawang Public School as the cleanup continues following a late-night fire at the school on Sunday. A demountable classroom was destroyed and other buildings were damaged. 2 boys aged 14 and 15 have been charged in relation to the fire. Tim McCallum from the Department of Education says the school community has rallied and is working to have lessons back to normal as soon as possible.
Face-to-face is where we want to get, and we'll be back there as soon as possible. A lot of work happening behind the scenes. Look, we would hope a little later this week, but we'll certainly keep our community up to date. We'll have all of the normal updates.
Licensed asbestos contractors have begun emptying and cleaning green waste bins in streets that were potentially contaminated by the fallout from the Wickham Wool Stores fire. Andy Lobb reports.
Collections were suspended in some areas with asbestos fragments found in foliage and clippings in some of the bins sampled. Contractors wearing PPE will empty bins into secure trucks for transport to the Summerhill Waste Facility. Traffic management measures may be in place in local streets during collection. Meanwhile, Newcastle Council will begin lawn mowing trials of Islington Park Oval. Specialist teams have picked over the park, but Council warns that occasional fragments can be reintroduced to the area from vehicles and falling from trees.
To cricket now, and Australia is likely to take an unchanged side into the Women's World Cup clash with South Africa in Wellington this morning. Unbeaten in 5 starts and their semi-final place already secure, Australia will resist the urge to rest and rotate players over their remaining preliminary matches. Australian all-rounder Ash Gardner says the goal remains to win every game.
We always put our best 11 out on the field, and I don't think we're necessarily going to try and hide anything. I think it's pretty obvious the way that we play cricket. We play pretty fearless cricket.
Patchy morning fog in the Hunter, mostly sunny this afternoon. Newcastle heading for a top of 29, Maitland 30, Singleton 31.
Breakfast with Dan and Jenny on ABC Newcastle.
ABC Newcastle.
Nice to have you here. Vicky says that smell is the Hunter River mangroves, and as the water drops, we can hear the mangrove mozzies hatching. Get your repellent on.
Vicky, if it's the Vicky I know, she lives right near those beautiful mangroves, which, please, we're going to get into that when ABC Newcastle's Carly Cook joins us after the news.
And I want to give a shout out to the Newey paddlers who are based over at Carrington. They paddle on Throsby Creek. Over the weekend, they raised $8,000 for the Hunter Melanoma Foundation. How good's that?
50 craft on the water, from kayaks to skis to stand-up paddleboards. The Hunter Valley Paddle Sports Club got involved, as well as the Lake Macquarie Sub Club.
This was the Paddle for Good Day, $8,000 for the Hunter Melanoma Foundation. Well done to all involved. What an effort.
Hi, I'm Richard Feidler. Tune in to Conversations, weekday mornings from 11 here on ABC Radio, or choose from thousands of shockingly thought-provoking conversations anytime on the ABC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with ABC News. Aged care providers are warning the growing cost of living pressures are leaving some aged care workers with either little or no money to spare. Political reporter Stephanie Boris has more.
New modelling by the Australian Aged Care Collaboration, which represents most of the country's aged care providers, found a worker with no dependents has just over $100 a week left after paying rent, transport, groceries and healthcare, while a single parent is $148 behind after paying for the essentials. Ahead of the federal election, Aged and Community Services Australia CEO Paul Sadler is calling on the major parties to commit more funding to boost wages.
There is a risk of an exodus of staff from the aged care sector.
The Fair Work Commission is looking at a wage increase and a decision is expected to be made by the middle of the year.
Former federal Labor MP Craig Thompson has spent the night in custody after being charged with breaching an apprehended violence order. The 57-year-old was arrested on the Central Coast yesterday, just hours after he pleaded guilty to domestic violence charges. An AVO was taken out against him last year after he sent 140 emails to his former wife, including 2 threatening ones. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has told Italy's parliament his country is on the brink of surviving the Russian invasion. His cautious optimism comes despite a warning from the Ukrainian military that Russia will continue indiscriminately shelling cities. There are also concerns Russia will redirect some of its soldiers based in several African countries to the front lines of the invasion. Speaking via video link, Mr. Zelensky has urged European countries to step up their pressure on Moscow.
The invasion has been going on for 27 days, practically 1 month. Therefore, we need even more sanctions, even more pressure, so that Russia stops looking for more military reserves or mercenaries somewhere in Syria or Libya and starts looking for peace.
The Lake Macquarie Yacht Club Commodore says a federal Labor election pledge to fund the purchase of a permanent dredge for the Swansea Channel is welcome news. If elected, Labor will spend $10 million on a dredge that would be operated by Lake Macquarie Council. Commodore Jeff Edmonds says has been campaigning on the issue for years and says it's the solution they've been looking for. He says they've turned away 6 regattas and hundreds of boats in recent years because of silt in the channel.
They go to the clubs and they go to the restaurants and the coffee shops and all the other businesses around, and they spend their money there, and that employs our people and our youth, and it's fantastic for the economy to be able to get the additional people on their boats into the lake.
Police are looking for a teenager who went missing from Newcastle last week. Cerise Elms is 13 years old and was last seen leaving a home in Wallsend on Tuesday the 15th of March. It's believed he may have been travelling with a woman known to him in a silver 4-wheel drive heading towards Queensland. Concerns are held for his welfare due to his young age and a number of medical conditions. To sport now, and Newcastle Knights forward Mitch Barnett says the team has started the season well, but the players aren't getting ahead of themselves. The Knights are sitting on top of the NRL ladder after 2 wins and head to Bathurst this weekend to take on defending premiers, the Penrith Panthers. Newcastle will welcome back Kalen Ponga and Daniel Saifidi, but will be without David Clemmer and Lachlan Fitzgibbon due to injury. Barnett says the injuries are unfortunate, but the team has to step up.
Look, we've had people in and out all pre-season with COVID and whatnot, so we've had a lot of practice at it. The challenge is, being able to do it for the whole year. So we've started well. We're not getting ahead of ourselves. We're 2 games in.
Meanwhile, West Tigers 5'8" Jackson Hastings will miss his club's next 3 NRL matches after being suspended by the judiciary. Hastings had originally been facing a 2-week ban for a Grade 2 dangerous throw charge following a tackle on Newcastle's Tex Hoy. A downgrade would have seen his penalty reduced to a fine, but the judiciary has upheld the charge. Checking the Hunter's weather, partly cloudy today, very high chance of showers in the lower Hunter. The chance of a thunderstorm, gusty winds and possible hail is expected. Newcastle heading for a top of 29 degrees, Maitland 30.
Breakfast with Dan and Jenny on ABC Newcastle.
ABC Newcastle.
How's your Wednesday? If you're leaving home under dry skies, just be aware that you might return home.
John Farnham said the same thing.
We will see. It's nearly time for the 6:30 news, but our London correspondents are reporting in from Belmarsh Prison, where Julian Assange has just been married.
Oh, it's done.
He's married his partner, Stella Morris. They had 4 guests and 2 witnesses inside the prison for that. And then after the ceremony, Stella Morris came outside. They kind of had some photos. She cut a wedding cake outside the prison. There were supporters there singing and drinking champagne and celebrating and so on. She did speak to the media too. So I think you'll be hearing more and seeing more from Belmarsh Prison as the day goes on.
We're going to talk sport after the news. Everybody's talking about our Ash Barty. What a legend. But shock announcement, she's only 25. Some more on that soon. You're on ABC Newcastle Breakfast with Dan and Jenny.
Hi, I'm Richard Feidler. Tune in to Conversations, weekday mornings from 11 here on ABC Radio, or choose from thousands of shockingly thought-provoking conversations anytime on the ABC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning, Ben Millington with ABC News. The United States has formally declared that Russians have committed war crimes in Ukraine. Here's North America correspondent Carrington Clark.
The US State Department says after carefully reviewing available information from public and intelligence services, it believes Russia has committed war crimes. It points to the allegedly deliberate targeting of civilians in Ukraine as evidence. Ukrainian officials say at least 2,400 civilians have died in besieged Mariupol alone. Russia has unleashed unrelenting violence across Ukraine, causing death and destruction. The United States President Joe Biden called Russian leader Vladimir Putin a war criminal last week, but this formal declaration ratchets up the pressure on the increasingly isolated leader.
An envoy to Russia's President Vladimir Putin has resigned, reportedly because of the war in Ukraine. Europe correspondent Barbara Miller reports from Lviv in Ukraine's west.
Anatoly Chubayev is the highest profile official to resign since the war in Ukraine began. His latest role was as an international climate envoy, but he's best known as the architect of economic reforms in the post-Soviet era. Anatoly Chubayev is reported to have left Russia because of his opposition to the war in Ukraine, but he's made no public comment. In Ukraine, the Russians have blown up a key bridge into the encircled city of Cherniv, further raising concerns about the humanitarian situation there. Barbara Miller, ABC News, Lviv.
Back home, more rapid antigen tests are being distributed to teachers and students in schools across the state as the number of COVID cases continues to climb. The Education Minister, Sarah Mitchell, says a small number of schools have reverted to learning from home arrangements because of the increasing cases. She says those schools that do have a higher number of cases will also reintroduce measures such as indoor mask wearing to try to contain the spread of the virus.
That will be on advice from our work health and safety teams at the department to those schools. The intention is that they would come in for a 7-day period, so really to act as that circuit breaker if we are seeing increased cases in our students or our staff at those particular schools. But it will be on a case-by-case basis.
The Stockton Beach Task Force met late yesterday to discuss the next moves towards a sand replenishment program to combat erosion along the beachfront. Deputy Premier Paul Toole, who took over from his predecessor John Barilaro in October, has asked to be brought up to speed before allocating what's been estimated to be around $21 million to get the project started. State member for Newcastle Tim Crackenthorpe attended the meeting.
It shows his commitment to seeing it through, that he wants to get some sort of organisation here in terms of what's to be done and when it's to be done, and then go through it in a fairly ordered manner. Certainly the community representatives made it very, very clear to the acting Premier that this is an absolute issue of urgency.
An emotional Stella Morris has greeted supporters of Julian Assange outside Belmarsh Prison, where she married the WikiLeaks founder overnight. Michelle Rimmer reports from London.
Just 4 guests and 2 witnesses were allowed inside the high-security prison to watch the couple say "I do." Outside the prison gates, Assange's supporters drank champagne and sang songs to celebrate the newlyweds. After the ceremony, Ms Morris left the prison without her new husband and joined the crowd for photos and to cut a wedding cake. She tried to hold back tears as she described her mixed emotions about marrying under the current conditions. Assange is facing extradition to the United States after the Supreme Court rejected his appeal request last week. Michelle Rimmer, ABC News, London.
To sport, a devastating final hour has put Australia in the box seat heading into day 4 of the 3rd cricket test against Pakistan in Lahore after bowling the home side out for 268 to lead by 134 runs. Australian captain Pat Cummins took 5 for 56, Mitchell Starc took 4 for 33 as Australia took the last 7 Pakistan wickets for 20 runs and the last 5 scalps for just 4. Starc says the dramatic finish was a reward for patience.
Certainly to keep in control of the scoreboard throughout the innings, and then once we had a sniff to really stay on and finish the day like we did today, that's I guess the blueprint, but I'm really proud of it to do the way we did today.
The Hunters weather, a very high chance of showers, the chance of a thunderstorm, possibly severe. Newcastle, Maitland, Singleton heading for a top of 23 degrees. ABC News.
Breakfast with Dan and Jenny on ABC Newcastle.
ABC Newcastle.
There was a collective groan across the country yesterday afternoon when phones and TVs pinged with the news that Arash Barty was retiring at only 25 years of age.
Octogenarians now, but we've lived through floods mostly the whole of our lives. So we've reached the stage where for 65 years, citizens have been making a desperate attempt to try and get something done that will make a difference. And we've never, ever gotten there. And this announcement today is just a relief, an enormous relief, because now I can die happy.
Beth Trevan and Richard Trevan speaking to Bronwyn Herbert on the back of that announcement. $10 million to fund a CSIRO study into the future of the Northern Rivers. After the news, Steve Simon's joining us with weather, but it is now 7:30.
Morning, Emma Rennie with ABC News. An independent inquiry is being launched in New South Wales to investigate flood causes, recovery and response. Phoebe Bowden reports.
The state government is establishing an independent inquiry after devastating floods across the state over the last month. It will be led by recently retired Police Commissioner Michael Fuller and the chair of the Independent Planning Commission, Mary O'Kane. Over the next 3 months, it will investigate land use, planning and management, as well as flood causation. An interim report will be given to the Premier by the end of June, with the inquiry wrapping up by September this year.
The federal government says flood mitigation measures for the region will be determined by a $10 million CSIRO study. The government has committed $75 million to fund the findings of the study, which will look at the Wilsons and Richmond River catchment areas. National Recovery and Resilience Agency Coordinator General Shane Stone says work on the study has already begun.
What the solution might be is yet to be decided. So this week, the CSIRO has already met with my officers, and the next step will be engaging with local council, and we have already started to progress this.
The woman who's been pushing for a catchment-wide flood study for years says it's absolutely critical for the survival of the region. Beth Trevan from Our Future Northern Rivers says previous studies have been narrow and piecemeal.
There's not a town or village that is anywhere near the floodplain that has not been affected. And until there's a catchment-wide evaluation by the best brains in the country, I don't believe that we'll get a proper solution that will actually make a difference into the future.
The federal member for Page, Kevin Hogan, says future flood mitigation measures should help to correct the market failure that's meant many people can't get flood insurance. Many residents and businesses in the Lismore CBD, as well as North and South Lismore, can't get flood insurance or face premiums running to tens of thousands of dollars a year. The Nationals MP says there's now a precedent for the Commonwealth to underwrite insurance in high-risk areas.
The precedent has just been set. We passed legislation very recently for Far North Queensland, and it was done as a pilot. They have market failure, as many areas around Australia do. It's there now. It's a vehicle that we can use, and we have to look at that as well.
The Greens say they'll prioritise flood-safe housing if their plan to build 15,000 new homes in the region goes ahead. Richmond candidate Mandy Nolan says the party will push for a range of new housing options if it holds the balance of power after the next election. She says the new homes would go into existing streets that have been assessed and approved for new builds.
We're really aware with the Greens, particularly at the moment, that we're going to build flood-safe housing, that we prioritise not going into rural areas and inappropriate areas.
The state member for Lismore says funding needs to be made available to either help flood victims rebuild or relocate to higher ground. Labor MP Janelle Saffin says in 2014 the ACT bought back more than 1,000 homes due to asbestos contamination. Ms Saffin says in Brisbane homes are being rebuilt with flood-resistant materials. She says many flood-affected Northern Rivers residents are unsure about how to move forward and funding is limited.
There is a voluntary house purchase scheme that exists and a house raising one, and I'm saying they've got to be an injection into them and then have someone have all these conversations with people. At the moment, there's no one having the conversations with them.
Police are investigating after a man's body was pulled from the Tweed River near Chindera. Officers were called in the early hours of Saturday morning after reports a 30-year-old man had jumped off a boat moored in the area. Police, Marine Rescue and Surf Life Saving members searched the river and foreshore area. Around 12 hours later, a man's body was located in nearby waters, believed to be that of the missing man. Police say they're investigating the circumstances around the incident. And mental health service Headspace is reminding young people that support is available as their community responds to flooding. Tweed Head Centre Manager Steve Dowker says the impacts of the floods can be traumatic.
The stages of grief and loss, that can be denial, it can be anger, it can be avoided. And so it's really about just supporting one another, checking if people are okay.
Turning to the weather, a mostly sunny day with top temperatures in the mid to high 20s. ABC News.
ABC North Coast.
Good morning, Joanne Shoebridge with you. We're going to check in with Headspace, and I guess, give you a bit of an idea of what you can be looking out for in your kids?
It's a long way off, Jo, actually, because it's just some of these projects, some of those landslides and slips, it's really difficult to work out how much they're going to cost. At the moment it really is just a guesstimate.
All right. Tweed Mayor Chris Jarry, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much, Jo.
It is news time, 7:30. Good morning, Emma Rennie with ABC News. The state government is providing demountables and alternative teaching sites to North Coast school students affected by the floods. Education Minister Sarah Mitchell says 20 schools have been flood damaged and alternative sites have been set up to give children face-to-face learning. The future of 5 schools remains undecided. Mullumbimby Public School Principal David Lees says his students are enjoying learning at the Brunswick Head Cinema.
Oh, look, it's certainly a novelty, I think, for many of them. We certainly don't normally equate a cinema to a school. And we're going to get back down here one day and really thank the Picture House for what they've done, because our teachers have still been able to be down here with the kids and provide that quality education.
Woodburn residents are hoping an independent inquiry into floods will find solutions to stop future flooding disasters on the North Coast. Retired Police Commissioner Mick Fuller and Independent Planning Commission Chair Mary O'Kane will lead the inquiry. Woodburn cafe owner Alex Clark says he hopes new dams will be considered for the region. He says finding accommodation is the biggest challenge.
We all need temporary accommodation. Virtually the whole of Woodburn is uninhabitable. Night time, it's a ghost town. When you drive through here, there's nobody staying in their places. There's people staying in camper trailers and caravans outside their places. But accommodation's a big deal.
The federal government is being urged to overhaul the social security and private rental sectors to help tackle the national housing and rental crisis. The University of New South Wales and Australian Council of Social Services have released a report showing regional rents have soared by 18% during the pandemic, partly driven by people's desire for homes rather than apartments. It's also blaming government cash grants to help build residential properties. Professor Hal Pawson from the NSW says the withdrawal of extra income support has also played a major role.
That kind of shone a light on a possible future that we decided, no, we don't want that. We're going to go back to what it was before. Just reverting to that after the pandemic, that's an overdue reform, which I think a lot of economists would agree is something which Australia should be contemplating anyway.
A geography expert is calling for a staged move of the Lismore CBD to higher ground. Barbara Rugendijk from Southern Cross University says there should be a cost-benefit analysis of flood mitigation versus relocation that also includes social and environmental considerations. She says land swaps, financial incentives and government planning assistance could help make Lismore safer for businesses and residents.
I think that the community is struggling to find a way forward. I'm optimistic. I think Lismore can have a wonderful and resilient future if we address these questions carefully now and plan for a future that removes people from the risk.
The federal government will spend almost $500 million on improving internet services in regional and remote areas under a budget announcement to be made today. Stephanie Dalzell reports.
The project aims to give 1 million households across the nation access to faster internet and more data. The government's chipping in $470 million, while the NBN will commit an extra $270 million. The network upgrade will cater to people in regional, remote and rural Australia, as well as outer metropolitan areas, and will offer faster internet, particularly during busy periods when more people are online or streaming content. NBN users in regional areas have long complained of poor internet speed, dropouts and data caps.
The Northern New South Wales Local Health District is reporting 249 new COVID-19 cases in the latest reporting period. The Clarence has the highest number of new cases at 52, followed by the Tweed at 50 and 48 in Ballina.
Concerns of increasing COVID numbers have prompted local health authorities to organise a mobile vaccination van for people to access. The local health district says in the wake of the floods, vaccination rates have dropped. Acting Chief Executive Matt Long says the vans will be visiting Gunnellabar, Casino, West Ballina, Benora Point and South Grafton from March 29.
We simply drive up and just ask people to come along. Pretty much every day they run between 9:30am and 2:30pm, and they're 2 days in each location. So 2 days in Gunnellabar, 2 days Casino, etc., etc. So if you miss it the first day, it'll be coming back the next.
To hear today's local news again, search online for ABC North Coast.
Across northern New South Wales, this is ABC North Coast.
Yes, it is. Good morning, I'm Joanne Shoebridge. Coming up, you'll hear from a Coraki man who has been one of those many people helping others despite losing almost everything he owns. So that to come up shortly. Also, an interview about the future of Lismore with the Southern Cross University geographer, Adjunct Professor Barbara Rugendijk. That coming up. A couple of your messages on the text line. Robert says, Wardell, Broadwater, Cabbage Tree Island schools, they'll be non-operational for a long time. Pop and Wild One, also called Real Wild Child from the 1986 album Blah Blah Blah. 7:30, it's news time.
Good morning, Emma Rennie with ABC News. Small business owners are calling for the federal government to introduce a scheme like JobKeeper for flood-affected communities. Lismore solicitor Tracy Randall has 10 employees and has paid $40,000 in wages since the floods, while her workers have been cleaning. She says everyone wants to see Lismore get back on its feet, but it's impossible without some targeted help.
When the entire CBD cannot operate, has no turnover, has no power. So we really do need JobKeeper to keep our employees living in the area so that they're there as soon as we can get back trading.
Page MP Kevin Hogan says he supports calls for JobKeeper to be introduced to flood-affected communities. Mr Hogan says he's been talking to federal ministers about how a scheme like that would work.
So it's about where do we target this and how do we target this. But look, I'm committed to getting something like this because I think it's crucial for a lot of the businesses in certain specific areas of our region.
Medical services displaced by the recent floods now have space to treat their patients at a newly created Lismore Primary Health Precinct. Healthy North Coast is behind the project and says it will operate at Southern Cross University's health facility. Chief Executive Julie Sturgis says multiple medical practices and health clinics have been flood damaged. She says many residents are suffering and it's important to provide help, especially for mental health.
Through our crisis lines and things like that, we've seen the demand really escalate. We know that it's really important to get those services up and operating. Rebuilding takes quite some time. For a period of up to 2 years, we'll be supporting services with space that they can practice from.
The state government is being asked to introduce an immediate 90-day cap on holiday letting in the Byron Shire to free up homes for flood victims. Ballina MP Tamara Smith is meeting the Planning Minister this week to discuss having the restriction imposed for 2 years. There's already been a campaign by Byron Council to impose the cap, which has so far been unsuccessful. Ms Smith says providing accommodation to people left homeless from the floods is a matter of urgency.
The 90 days is something we were promised, and the best thing the government could deliver right now is that, because we know there'll be about 800 whole homes at least that will come onto the private rental market, and we desperately need it post the floods.
Lismore City Council is confident state and federal government funding will cover the cost of fixing 2 key sewage treatment plants that were severely damaged in the flood. General Manager John Walker says about 5 megalitres of untreated sewage is passing through the plants each day into the Wilsons River. That's about 2 Olympic pools worth. Mr Walker says it will cost a lot of money to fix.
To do it and flood-proof the future sewage treatment plants is estimated at a little over $100 million. It could be done for less. We could replace, as we're going to have to, east Lismore and repair south Lismore. That's probably about $60 million.
Clarence Valley Council has closed sections of Yamba Main Beach due to a landslip and the discovery of asbestos. Heavy rainfall during the flood event caused the land slippage, which exposed old non-friable asbestos building material. Council's Open Spaces manager Peter Birch says air monitoring tests have been conducted and are of acceptable safe levels. He wants the public to stay away until the material can be removed.
We've barricaded the area off and put warning signs there for people to stay out of those areas until we can remove the material and work out how we're going to stabilise the area. It looks like it's historical building construction material. Up until now, it's been covered with vegetation.
An 80-year-old woman has died after a fatal crash near Stoker's Siding. Police say a Mazda collided with a truck on Tweed Valley Way on Monday afternoon, with a third car also hit in the crash. The Mazda passenger died at the scene, while the driver was taken to Gold Coast University Hospital in a serious condition. The other two drivers were treated for minor injuries. There have been 354 new COVID-19 cases on the North Coast in the latest reporting period. The Clarence Valley has the highest number of new cases at 91, followed by the Tweed with 81, Ballina 55 and Byron has reported 51. 12 COVID patients are in North Coast hospitals, with 2 of those in ICU. To hear today's local news again, search online for ABC North Coast.
You're listening to ABC North Coast.
Good morning to you. We're going to continue the conversation about business and calls for JobKeeper to be extended to flood-affected businesses.
To a navigation hazard in a river, then it's targeted by our teams as a priority. And indeed, offshore, if these things are floating around offshore, our aerial surveillance, the aircraft are flying up the beaches, but of course the surveillance itself, we're able to see at least a couple of kilometres offshore, so we can pick up any floating debris. There hasn't been much sign of that. We have seen refrigerators and shipping containers and parts of vehicles, and in one instance in the Hawkesbury River there was a large pump, an irrigation reel that was actually washed out of the river. And so, you're right, these things, debris can float around offshore for some time, but we do keep a close eye on that.
Jeff Ross from the Environment Protection Authority. What have you seen on the beaches? 0467 922 684 is my SMS. It's news time. Good morning, Emma Rennie with ABC News. Southern Cross University says thousands of high school students currently using the Lismore campus are safe, despite deeply concerning results from the National University Student Safety Survey. More than 700 SCU students took part, with 30 reporting they'd been sexually assaulted since starting their tertiary studies. Around 90 also reported being sexually harassed. Vice-Chancellor Professor Tyrone Carlin says measures are in place to ensure the safety of school students from flood-affected schools.
The designation of those parts of the university as, in effect, off-limits. And we've also worked very, very closely with both our security teams and police to make sure that those students are absolutely safe.
Ballina Shire Council says it's concerned that raw sewage from Lismore is contributing to poor water quality in the Richmond River and nearby beaches. 2 of Lismore's treatment plants were severely damaged in the floods. An estimated 5 megalitres of untreated sewage is passing through the plants and into the river each day. Ballina's Environmental Health Coordinator, Rachel Jenner, says people need to stay out of the water for at least the next few weeks.
I think all we can do is communicate with the community and let them know the risks so that they can make choices about not exposing themselves to that contamination at the moment by swimming or surfing or otherwise hopping in the water at the moment.
Meanwhile, the Environment Protection Authority says the sewage is quickly diluted, but people should avoid unnecessary contact.
The risk is relatively low. There's still a large amount of water moving through the system, and it's disposing of that flood waste quite effectively. So at this stage, we're still discouraging people from entering river systems and swimming.
The
local health district says residents should treat all floodwater as contaminated, even now, weeks after the floods, as water may still be affected by ongoing runoff, clean-up and infrastructure issues. The chief executive of Ozfish says it will take at least 12 months for the region's waterways and fish to recover from the floods. Craig Copeland says hundreds of thousands of fish have died in the post-flood fish kill event. Among them was a Queensland groper, which washed up on a Ballina beach, a species that can be about 2 metres in length. Mr Copeland says not much can be done to fast-track the recovery.
Not only have we killed the fish, but we've killed all the organisms on the bottom of the river that the fish eat. And so that's going to present a problem for some time. And as we know from previous fish kills, it really does take a while.
A bid to remove the words climate change from a Lismore City Council motion recognising the toll of the recent floods has failed. The motion recognised the heartache and loss experienced by the community and the efforts of those who saved lives. Councillor Ellie Bird says she also wanted the council to acknowledge that the region will experience more severe weather events if climate change continues to escalate.
There were some councillors that didn't want to reference climate change, but this event happened on exactly the same day as the release of the latest IPCC report, which clearly shows that events of this nature will continue to happen.
Lismore residents will be able to pick up medication from the newly created Lismore Primary Health Precinct at Southern Cross University. The Southside Pharmacy building was destroyed in the floods 3 weeks ago and has been operating out of a pop-up site ever since. Legislative requirements mean they can only dispense medication from that site, but managing partner Kyle Woods says people can now access medications at the health precinct as well.
We've got a delivery van constantly driving. There's about wait time of half an hour. The girls up here will send it down. It'll be dispensed and brought up here. If people can either wait for half an hour and it'll be back here, or they can go home and we can get it delivered to them for free.
Richmond Valley residents looking for some fresh produce are being encouraged to head to the casino showgrounds. 10 pallets of apples, lettuce, tomatoes and celery were left at the showgrounds yesterday, along with pasta, rice and jars of butter chicken sauce. Richmond Valley Council says it's grateful, but with no refrigeration facilities available, the food will spoil within days. And there's been a 20% rise in new COVID cases in the Northern Rivers in the last 2 daily updates. There have been 429 new cases in the latest reporting period. That compares to 354 new cases the day prior. Tweed has the highest number at 105. The number of COVID-positive cases in local hospitals has risen to 16, with 3 of those in intensive care. To hear today's local news again, search online for ABC North Coast.
On your radio, online and on the ABC Listen app. This is ABC North Coast.
Good morning, Joanne Shoebridge with you. If you've been out and about walking along the estuaries, along the banks, along the rivers and beaches, particularly down towards the mouths of our rivers and along the beaches, what do you find?
Ellen O'Neill there, talking us through a big weekend in sport. She will, of course, be back with us around the same time on Friday, and Paul Bankovic with us after the 6:30 news on Wednesday.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with the ABC Hunter News. 2 teenagers have been arrested following a fire that destroyed 2 demountable buildings at a Hunter school overnight. Emergency services were called to Irrawang Public School on Gear Street in Raymond Terrace just after 10:30 p.m. Officers found 2 demountable buildings engulfed in flames, while a number of classrooms had been broken into and vandalised. A 14 and 15-year-old boy have been arrested and remain in police custody. A crime scene has been established and inquiries are continuing. The Beyond Zero Emissions organisation says a 500-megawatt battery at the Liddell Power Station is a great step towards the establishment of the Hunter Renewable Energy Zone. The state government has approved the battery to help take up the load when AGL closes Liddell next year. Samantha Meller from Beyond Zero Emissions says AGL's battery is a huge step in the diversification of energy production and storage in the Hunter.
The Liddell site is obviously fantastic because it has a lot of existing infrastructure, so it makes a lot of sense for a large-scale, like a grid-scale battery to be there.
Residents of Wickham and Islington say they're stunned at a decision by Newcastle Council to mow a section of Islington Park affected by asbestos. Chunks of asbestos fell on Islington Park when the nearby Wickham wool stores were destroyed in a fire nearly 3 weeks ago. The park was reopened last week, but residents say they're finding pieces of asbestos in the grass. Will Sherman learned via a letterbox drop that council will do a test mow tomorrow, which he says is a bad idea.
Anything that goes up in those blades is going to get shoved out the back, smashed to pieces and thrown in the air. So, you're almost sort of pouring fuel on the fire.
Newcastle Council says the purpose of the trial is to see whether the park can be mowed safely and that it will have air monitors in place. A Lake Macquarie charity wants to pair householders with young people and older women who are homeless in a bid to address the housing crisis. South Lakes Incorporated plans to trial Share Your Home in the Central Coast and Hunter regions. Founder and CEO Christine Mastello says arrangements would last for up to 3 months.
We're just going to allow the homeless teenagers and the homeless women from domestic violence or whatever their situation to just stay on the streets while our government gets around to building this social housing? No, we have to do something now. We've waited so long.
2 people have died with COVID-19 in the Hunter New England Health District at the weekend. A woman in her 90s from Maitland and a man in his 80s from Cessnock are the latest deaths in the Hunter. The region recorded more than 1,700 new cases. 29 people with the virus are receiving care in hospital. The New South Wales Department of Primary Industries is investigating the death of a rare red panda hit by a car after it escaped from Symbio Wildlife Park in the Illawarra. 8-year-old Kasari was hit on the Princess Motorway, escaping when a tree fell on an enclosure last week. Animal Justice Party MP Emma Hurst says the accident might have been avoided.
It'd be interesting to see what comes of that investigation and whether there was safety measures that were ignored by this zoo, but we would like to see the outcome of those investigations.
Turning to sport now, in rugby league, Newcastle Knights coach Adam O'Brien says he was impressed with his team's win over the West Tigers, given how many players weren't able to take the field. The Knights beat the Tigers 26-4 yesterday at Hunter Stadium in front of more than 23,000 fans. They were without key players like Kalen Ponga, David Clemmer and Daniel Saifidi. After the game, O'Brien said the whole team stepped up.
The elephant in the room is the amount of guys that were missing. And we had 7 players this week that didn't participate in one training run, not even captain's run. They just turned up to play today. So we've worked really hard on our culture, and I know that's as good as next man up mentality that I've seen from the boys.
But it was a tough day at the office for the Knights in the NRLW, who were beaten by the Dragons 40 points to 4. Checking the Hunters' weather, partly cloudy today. Newcastle, Maitland and Scone all expecting a top of 26 degrees. Singleton heading for a top of 27. For more local news, search ABC Newcastle News online.
Amelia Bernasconi on ABC Upper Hunter.
ABC Upper Hunter.
Good morning. Thank you for your company here on ABC Upper Hunter this Monday morning. I hope the day, the week is starting off well, wherever we find you around the Upper Hunter. Dirty news. Bit of fog around this morning. We're in for a mostly sunny afternoon, though. Our top temperatures today up around the 30-degree mark. Plenty more to come on ABC Upper Hunter after the news.
ABC Radio, it's yours.
Yours for local news.
Yours for local stories.
Yours for emergency information. ABC Upper Hunter.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with ABC Hunter News. Labor says it will spend $10 million on a permanent dredge for the Swansea Channel if it wins the next federal election. The pledge is part of a $20 million economic development package for Lake Macquarie that will be announced today. The package also includes $10 million to extend the Newcastle Mines Grouting Fund to deal with mining subsidence in the Lake Macquarie area. Member for Shortland, Pat Conroy, says they've worked closely with Lake Macquarie Council to deliver what is needed.
And what they've requested of us is $10 million to help purchase a dredge that they would then operate and either have the maintenance costs themselves or approach the state government. And we've worked really closely with the council on both these announcements because they're both critical to the economic future of Lake Macquarie.
It'll be learning from home again today for students at Irrawang Public School as the clean-up continues following a late-night fire at the school on Sunday. A demountable classroom was destroyed and other buildings were damaged. 2 boys aged 14 and 15 have been charged in relation to the fire. Tim McCallum from the Department of Education says the school community has rallied and is working to have lessons back to normal as soon as possible.
Face-to-face is where we want to get, and we'll be back there as soon as possible. A lot of work happening behind the scenes. Look, we would hope a little later this week, but we'll certainly keep our community up to date. We'll have all of the normal updates.
The State's Attorney-General has told Parliament a decision could be imminent relating to a pardon petition lodged by convicted Hunter Valley baby killer Kathleen Folbig. Giselle Wakatama reports.
In 2003, Kathleen Folbig was sentenced to 25 years jail for the manslaughter of one of her children and the murders of 3 others. Leading Australian scientists lodged a petition in March last year lobbying the New South Wales Attorney-General Mark Speakman to recommend a pardon, claiming a rare genetic mutation inherited by 2 of the babies could explain their deaths. Mark Speakman has told Budget Estimates the petition originally included 700 pages, but now included an extra 2,000 to 3,000 pages. He said senior and junior counsel had now been briefed on the matter and anticipates being able to reveal more information within a month.
Police have confirmed that human remains found on a Central Coast beach are those of a missing 20-year-old man. Logan Lacerdo was last seen north of the entrance on November the 26th. Police have confirmed his remains were found on Soldiers Beach at Norah Head a fortnight ago. They say there are no suspicious circumstances. Licensed asbestos contractors have begun emptying and cleaning green waste bins in streets that were potentially contaminated by the fallout from the Wickham Wool Stores fire. Andy Lobb reports.
Collections were suspended in some areas with asbestos fragments found in foliage and clippings in some of the bins sampled. Contractors wearing PPE will empty bins into secure trucks for transport to the Summerhill Waste Facility. Traffic management measures may be in place in local streets during collection. Meanwhile, Newcastle Council will begin lawn mowing trials at Islington Park Oval. Specialist teams have picked over the park, but Council warns that occasional fragments can be reintroduced to the area from vehicles and falling from trees.
One Nation's state leader, Mark Latham, is calling for an overhaul of Newcastle's public housing. Mr Latham, who grew up in public housing, says it should be redeveloped with tenants moved to general living in the suburbs. He says deconcentrating public housing leads to better social and economic outcomes.
It's the general rule that if you put disadvantaged people in the one disadvantaged place, you aggravate the extent of disadvantage. You're better off spreading them out, the salt and pepper approach.
The New South Wales government says it's working to break up pockets of high-density public housing in Newcastle. It responded to a question on notice from Mr Latham, saying it's working with the local council to deliver improved outcomes, including working through a program to deconcentrate estates. It says it's also focusing on integrating social housing into mixed tenure communities. And briefly, more than 1,500 new COVID cases were diagnosed in the Hunter, New England during the latest reporting period. It comes as the number of people with the virus being treated in hospital increases as well, with 33 currently receiving care. 3 people are in intensive care. Checking the Hunters weather, mostly sunny afternoon ahead. Newcastle heading for a top of 29 degrees, Maitland 30, Singleton and Scone 31. ABC News.
Amelia Bernasconi on ABC Upper Hunter.
ABC Upper Hunter. Hope you have some plans for this sunny afternoon that is on the way, and the morning shaping up not too bad either. Florence and the Machine and Dog Days are over, taking us up to the latest local news. This is ABC Upper Hunter. After 5 minutes of news, we're going to talk politics. Stay with me though. We know that despite the federal election not yet being called, our candidates are hitting the ground hard. You'll hear from the Nationals in just a moment. A few heavyweights in town yesterday. Talk all things transition, agriculture and the future after the news.
ABC Radio, it's yours.
Yours for local news.
Yours for local stories.
Yours for emergency information. ABC Upper Hunter.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Lewis with ABC Hunter News. Newcastle Council is hoping the Deputy Premier will commit to funding a mass sand nourishment program at a Stockton Beach Task Force meeting today. Ben Millington reports.
Last month, the Deputy Premier, Paul Toole, inspected the erosion at Stockton for the first time, but this will be the first task force meeting since they were cancelled last year due to the pandemic. A report in December found ongoing sand top-ups are the most cost-effective option to replenish the beach. Newcastle Lord Mayor Nuatali Nelms says state government approvals are needed to get the sand onto the beach. She's hoping for a funding commitment today, with the initial mass sand nourishment expected to cost at least $21 million. Councillor Nelms says documents that may be needed to support the approval process have been provided to the state government.
Rain forecast for much of New South Wales today is expected to continue into next week. The State Emergency Service is preparing staff and resources to be on standby. There's a chance of more flooding in the Northern Rivers region. In the Hunter, there's a chance of a thunderstorm this afternoon, which may lead to flash flooding. The Lake Macquarie Yacht Club Commodore says a federal Labor election pledge to fund the purchase of a permanent dredge for the Swansea Channel is welcome news. If elected, Labor will spend $10 million on a dredge that would be operated by Lake Macquarie Council. Commodore Jeff Edman has been campaigning on the issue for years and says it's the solution they've been looking for. He says they've turned away half a dozen regattas and hundreds of boats in recent years because of silt in the channel.
They go to the clubs and they go to the restaurants and the coffee shops and all the other businesses around, and they spend their money there, and that employs our people and our youth, and it's fantastic for the economy to be able to get the additional people on their boats into the lake.
A Commonwealth-funded network aimed at improving healthcare in the Hunter and Central Coast says an ageing GP workforce and a reliance on locums is impacting services. Carly Cook reports.
The Hunter New England Central Coast Primary Health Network is one of 200 groups or individuals to make a submission to a federal inquiry into the provision of general practitioner and related primary health services in rural and regional areas. It covers an area from Gosford in the south to Queensland in the north and west to Gunnedah. The network says key issues include access, funding and resources, an ageing workforce, registrar placements, digital health, infrastructure and caring for older Australians. It says a workforce shortage is having an impact and notes approximately 40% of the workforce in the region are international medical graduates.
Police are looking for a teenager who went missing from Newcastle last week. Cerise Elms is 13 years old and was last seen leaving a home in Wallsend on Tuesday the 15th of March. It's believed he may have been travelling with a woman known to him in a silver four-wheel drive heading towards Queensland. Concerns are held for his welfare due to his young age and a number of medical conditions. In rugby league, knee injuries have sidelined Newcastle forwards David Clemmer and Lachlan Fitzgibbon for this week's clash with defending premiers, the Penrith Panthers. Clemmer had surgery yesterday and is likely to miss a couple of weeks, while Fitzgibbon may also need surgery, but it's unclear how long he'll be out. But the Knights will welcome back Kalen Ponga and Daniel Saifidi. Brian To'o is out for the Panthers, while Nathan Cleary could make a return. But Newcastle forward Mitch Barnett says whoever plays, the Panthers will be strong.
I know they'd have, either young kids or some other players ready to step into that role and, do it to the best of their ability and, perform well. So it's up to us about, showing up with a really steely mindset and performing well.
In men's A-League soccer, Newcastle Jets defender Jordan Elsey says the team's spirit is high and they're treating each game like a final. The Jets take on Sydney FC at home on Friday night and are looking for as many wins as possible to move into the top six. Elsey says last week's 4-0 win was a team effort and they're hoping to keep the momentum going.
Everything came together. Everyone was encouraging each other on the field and we were there for the main goal, which is a win. As a few people have said this week, every game's a final. I think we've got 10 games left, so we're going in every game's a final and we need these points.
Partly cloudy in the Hunter today, very high chance of showers in the lower Hunter, the chance of a thunderstorm this afternoon, gusty winds and possible hail expected as well. Newcastle heading for a top of 29 degrees, Maitland 30, Singleton 32.
Amelia Bernasconi on ABC Upper Hunter.
ABC Upper Hunter. Partly cloudy this Wednesday. Hope you've got some good indoor plans. We're expecting, like you heard there with Maddie, quite a few showers around the Hunter later today morning. There's been a multi-vehicle crash at Taro. This is on the New England Highway between the Hexham Bridge and Anderson Drive. So some significant delays there if you are heading to Newcastle. If you're staying here with us in the Upper Hunter, we'll catch you after the news.
ABC Radio, it's yours.
Yours for local news.
Yours for local stories.
Yours for emergency information. ABC Upper Hunter.
Good morning, Ben Millington with ABC Hunter News. Around 1 in 5 University of Newcastle students surveyed as part of a national safety report say they've been sexually harassed in a university setting. Carly Cook reports.
Last year, the Social Research Centre surveyed almost 44,000 university students across the country to measure students' perceptions and experiences of safety in university communities. 862 University of Newcastle students took part. 17.9% said they'd been sexually harassed since starting university, while 6% said they'd been sexually assaulted. Of those who'd experienced sexual harassment, 45% said it happened in general campus areas, while 23% said it happened in lecture theatres and computer labs. Just 4% made a formal complaint to the university.
The number of people in local hospitals with COVID-19 has fallen despite a spike in new cases. The Health District recorded 2,673 new cases in the figures announced yesterday, almost 500 more than the previous day. 33 people with the virus are being treated in local hospitals, down from 39. 3 people in hospital are in intensive care. Meanwhile, more rapid antigen tests are being distributed to teachers and schools and students across the state as the number of COVID cases continues to climb. The Education Minister, Sarah Mitchell, says a small number of schools have reverted to learning from home arrangements because of the increasing cases. She says those schools that do have a higher number of cases will also reintroduce measures such as indoor mask wearing to try to contain the spread of the virus.
That will be on advice from our work health and safety teams at the department to those schools. The intention is that they would come in for a 7-day period, so really to act as that circuit breaker if we are seeing increased cases in our students or our staff at those particular schools. But it will be on a case-by-case basis.
An aviation expert has described Rex's planned fare increase for regional flights as opportunistic. The regional airline is set to increase fares across its domestic and regional networks by $10 in response to what it calls increases in operational costs due to rising fuel prices. Port Stephens-based Strategic Aviation Solutions Chairman Neil Hansford says Rex's decision is an over-recovery of costs.
That's an over-recovery of the rising costs. And in fact, fuel has come off the top and it's actually coming down. So it, to me, is opportunistic.
A Newcastle grocer says he's being forced to put up prices each week in the face of a perfect storm of inflationary pressures. Dominic Iacano from Jasmine Fruit Barn says the cost of fuel, lost supply due to the floods and soaring overseas freight costs are driving up wholesale prices. He says leafy vegetables and greens have been hardest hit by the floods.
Just say like iceberg lettuce, normally say $1.99, $2.99 each, is nearly up to $7-8 each. It's very, very high. It's astronomical price, yeah.
The Stockton Beach Task Force met late yesterday to discuss the next moves toward a sand replenishment program to combat erosion along the beachfront. Deputy Premier Paul Toole, who took over from his predecessor John Barilaro in October, has asked to be brought up to speed before allocating what's been estimated to be around $21 million to get the project started. State member for Newcastle, Tim Krakenthorpe, attended the meeting.
It shows his commitment to seeing it through, that he wants to get some sort of organisation here in terms of what's to be done and when it's to be done, and then go through it in a fairly ordered manner. Certainly the community representatives made it very, very clear to the acting Premier that this is an absolute issue of urgency.
To sport, Newcastle Jets midfielder Mo Altay says the players are proud of last week's clean sheet, but consistency is the key. The Jets are coming off a 4-0 win heading into tomorrow night's home clash with Sydney FC. Altay says the hard work at training paid off last round and that needs to continue to make the finals.
Getting the little details right, and I think we did that on the weekend. But it's just about consistency now, and that's just the main focus for us, trying to be consistent, getting that clean sheet, always, being organised, staying solid at the back.
The Hunters' weather, a very high chance of showers and the chance of a thunderstorm, possibly severe. That's the latest ABC News. For more local news, search ABC News online.
Amelia Bernasconi on ABC Upper Hunter.
ABC Upper Hunter.
Good morning. I hope you're waking up well today. It's lovely to be with you on ABC Upper Hunter.